Pregnant wife visits doctor, only to find millionaire husband supporting mistress at the appointment. Scandal doesn't sneak in quietly. It arrives with the force of a crashing wave, sweeping away everything you thought was stable. This tale begins on a sunny Monday, inside the hallowed halls of Mount Sinai Hospital, where a beaming pregnant wife eagerly awaits her prenatal checkup. But rather than comfort and routine, she encounters a secret that rips apart her flawless life in an instant. Her millionaire husband, once her hero, is discovered supporting another pregnant woman in the same clinic. In that charged moment, years of trust crumble, and she stands on the precipice of heartbreak, betrayal, and a storm of consequences that nobody saw coming. Lillian Moore had grown used to a life that glittered like diamonds under Broadway lights. At 29, she found herself married to Adrian Moore, a man whose name graced the covers of magazines like Forbes and Business Insider. Adrian had climbed the entrepreneurial ladder swiftly, transforming a modest tech startup into a multi-million-dollar empire in only a few years. Their home on New York's Upper West Side boasted floor-to-ceiling windows, a spiral staircase imported from Italy, and modern art curated by top galleries around the world. Yet beneath the shiny exterior, a creeping unease had begun to tug at Lillian's mind. Small, subtle warnings she had initially brushed aside. She blamed her own anxious nature, or, more recently, the hormones from her pregnancy. She was 6 months along, her belly growing rounder by the day. Sometimes, in the quiet moments at dawn, she would place a hand on her abdomen and promise the child she'd give him or her the kind of love and stability she never had while growing up in a broken home. Adrian was her knight in shining armor, or so she had believed. He appeared to worship her, surprising her with couture dresses from Balenciaga and dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. He always insisted on the best prenatal care, so he scheduled her appointments at Mount Sinai Hospital, one of the finest medical institutions in the country. Lillian teased him that he was more excited about the baby than she was, though she actually found his devotion comforting. But over the past few months, the relationship that once felt rock solid had developed hairline fractures. Adrian's phone calls became more mysterious. He'd walk out of the room to speak in hushed tones. Business trips multiplied. Odd charges cropped up on their joint credit card, luxury spa appointments in Midtown. She'd never visited, extravagant purchases from Prada that didn't end up in her closet. When Lillian asked, Adrian dismissed her gently, claiming it was all client-related spending. The morning of her next prenatal appointment began with hope. "He'll come this time," Lillian told herself, remembering how he'd missed the last two. "Just had an urgent meeting," he'd said the first time, board crisis the next. Today, though, he had promised to stand beside her. She woke early, slipping into a flowing maxi dress that accommodated her belly. The baby fluttered inside, a soft reminder of its presence. She arrived in the kitchen, greeted by their live-in housekeeper, Gloria, who offered a warm smile and a plate of fresh fruit. "Adrian already left," Gloria said apologetically, noticing Lillian's eyes sweep the empty space. The words struck Lillian like a minor punch, but she forced a calm nod. "He told me he'd meet me at the hospital." Barely tasting the fruit, she gathered her bag and left. Their private driver navigated Manhattan traffic with ease, eventually pulling up to the stately entrance of Mount Sinai. She stepped out into the swirl of patients, doctors, and visitors. The hospital's grandeur offered reassurance. Everything there seemed professional, secure, controlled. As she checked in at the front desk, Lillian felt that familiar flicker of anxiety. Would Adrian really show up? She texted him a gentle reminder, "I'm here. See you soon, right?" and settled into a seat in the waiting room. Glancing around, she saw other expectant mothers flipping through magazines or fiddling with phones. She yearned for the comfort of her husband by her side, his hand entwined with hers as they anticipated the next ultrasound. Instead, she waited alone, each passing minute intensifying her restlessness. Suddenly, Adrian texted back, "Stuck in traffic. Be there soon. Love you." The message soothed her somewhat. But just as her tension began to ease, her gaze drifted to a man standing in the corridor beyond the waiting room window. His back was turned, but everything about him, his posture, his dark hair, the tailored lines of his suit, screamed Adrian. She stood to wave him down. Then she noticed he wasn't alone. A tall, elegant woman with dark, wavy hair stood close to him. Lillian couldn't see the woman's face, but she could see something else distinctly, a very pregnant belly. Adrian's head inclined toward the woman, voice low, hand resting on her forearm. The posture was more intimate than any standard business conversation could be. Lillian's heart lurched. Her eyes played tricks on her, right? Adrian had an explanation, right? A tangle of confusion and panic seized her. She moved to the door separating the waiting room from the corridor, stepping out as quietly as she could. Standing behind a half-drawn privacy curtain, Lillian watched. The woman, who wore a sleek black maternity dress, looked anxious. Adrian's voice was too low for Lillian to catch entire sentences, but fragments drifted through. "I'll handle it. Don't worry. The bills are taken care of." At that point, Lillian's entire body went cold. This can't be real. Yet it was. She recognized her husband's distinctive tone, gentle, concerned, even loving. That tone used to belong to her alone. Before she could gather the courage to interrupt, the woman pivoted slightly, revealing a glimpse of her face. Lillian froze. She recognized that face from a corporate event months ago. Beatrice Lang, a rising star in the marketing world. She was rumored to be heading big campaigns for Adrian's firm, among others. She was also rumored to be single. Head spinning, Lillian retreated, tears threatening to burn her eyes. She didn't want a confrontation in a hospital corridor. She didn't want a public scene. What am I supposed to do? Then the hospital staffer called her name, indicating it was time for her exam. In a daze, Lillian followed, uncertain whether to unravel the truth now or cling to the possibility that she was misunderstanding something. But as she entered the exam room, the mental image of Adrian leaning protectively over another pregnant woman seared into her thoughts. For the first time, she felt a dreadful certainty that her husband had betrayed her in the most painful way imaginable. As the nurse measured her weight and blood pressure, Lillian's thoughts scattered like shards of glass. She remembered how Adrian once boasted about his impeccable sense of morality, how he detested cheaters, how he took marriage vows seriously. He had promised fidelity and devotion in front of all their loved ones on that picturesque day in Central Park. How could he possibly be involved with someone else, someone who was also pregnant? When Dr. Patel, her obstetrician, walked in, Lillian forced a polite smile. "How are you feeling today?" Dr. Patel asked kindly. "I'm okay," she lied, her voice trembling. "Doctor," Patel raised an eyebrow, noticing her demeanor. "Stress can affect your blood pressure, especially in pregnancy. Let's see how baby is doing." Minutes later, the rhythmic thump-thump of the fetal heartbeat flooded the room, ordinarily a source of reassurance and joy. But Lillian felt oddly numb. She tried to focus on the ultrasound monitor, seeing the outline of a tiny foot, a flutter of movement, and listening to Dr. Patel's soft commentary about healthy growth. Any other time, Lillian would have been enamored, brimming with love. Today, though, a storm raged in her mind. "You have any concerns you want to discuss, Doctor?" Patel asked, noticing her patient's subdued reaction. Lillian's eyes glistened. She longed to pour out her fear and heartbreak, but how did one summarize a shattered marriage in a single breath? "I'm just overwhelmed, I guess. Dr. Patel gently patted her shoulder. Make sure you have a good support system. And if you ever need to speak with our mental health counselor, let me know. By the time the appointment ended, Lillian's phone buzzed with missed calls from Adrian. She ignored them. She didn't want to face him, didn't want him to feed her more lies. As she stepped back into the corridor, scanning for a glimpse of her husband or that woman, neither was in sight. She half expected them to appear together, but the hallway was empty. Feeling crushed, she left the hospital alone, climbing into a cab rather than waiting for the driver. Adrian had assigned to her. She needed to be by herself to process. Her world felt disjointed, her chest tight and aching. She directed the cab to a small cafe near Central Park, ironically the same park where they had exchanged vows. Sipping a cup of peppermint tea, she stared at a text from Adrian. "Hey, where are you? I arrived late and couldn't find you. Please answer." She typed nothing in reply, too numb for a confrontation. Instead, she found herself scrolling through social media, hating how perfect their life looked from the outside, smiling photos at black tie events, philanthropic galas, exotic vacation snapshots. All a lie, her mind hissed. In that moment, her phone rang. It was her friend, Naomi, who worked as a journalist for the New York Times. Naomi's voice was bright and curious. "Hey, Lil, how's the baby? I'm in your neighborhood and thought maybe we could grab lunch." Lillian swallowed a sob, trying to maintain composure. "Actually, I'm not great." Naomi sensed the tremor in her tone. "Oh my God, what's wrong? Is it the pregnancy?" Tears slid down Lillian's cheeks. "No, it's Adrian." Within half an hour, Naomi arrived at the cafe, her brow furrowed with concern. Lillian, despite her usual love of privacy, spilled the entire story, finding Adrian with Beatrice at Mount Sinai, the hush-hush conversation about covering expenses, and the obvious fact that Beatrice was pregnant. Naomi listened, eyes widening as the details piled up. "That's insane," Naomi said when Lillian finished, voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, are you sure? Maybe he was just helping a friend or a co-worker. She's pregnant, Naomi. And the way he touched her arm, the things I heard, it was intimate. He was definitely talking about paying her bills." Lillian's voice cracked. "What if the baby is his?" Naomi exhaled, her expression shifting from disbelief to fury. "We'll figure it out. In the meantime, you need to protect yourself. If he's actually carrying on with another woman, you can't just let him blindside you." A mixture of grief and anger simmered in Lillian's chest. She nodded. "I want answers. I can't just sit and wait for him to feed me lies." Naomi, ever the inquisitive journalist, tapped her chin. "Maybe I can do a little digging. Beatrice Lang is somewhat known in marketing circles. Let me see if she's been out and about, or if there's any gossip tying her to Adrian's company." Part of Lillian hesitated. Prying into someone else's life felt invasive. But then again, hadn't her life been invaded already, her marriage turned upside down by secrets? She gave Naomi a faint nod. "Anything you can find. I just need the truth." Naomi gently squeezed Lillian's hand. "In the meantime, take care of yourself and the baby. Don't let this consume you entirely." Easier said than done, Lillian thought, sipping the last of her tea as her mind spun with dread. By the time she got back into another cab and headed to the penthouse, she felt only a fraction calmer. She dreaded entering the lavish home, dreaded seeing Adrian's face. But she also knew she couldn't avoid this confrontation forever. Adrian paced inside the penthouse's grand foyer when Lillian arrived. He looked more disheveled than usual, collar undone, a fine sheen of sweat on his forehead. As soon as the front door clicked shut, he rushed toward her. "Lil, I'm so sorry I missed the appointment," he started, voice fraught. "I got there, but I couldn't find you." "I saw you, Adrian," she interrupted, her tone dangerously low. "With her." He froze, face draining of color, his mouth opened, then snapped shut, as though searching for the right words but coming up short. Lillian's heart pounded in her chest, fury and heartbreak swirling. "I saw you talking to Beatrice," she continued, eyes stinging with tears. "And I saw her pregnant belly. Don't even try to deny it." Adrian rubbed the back of his neck, clearly rattled. "Lil, it's not what you think," she let out a bitter laugh. "Every cheater's motto, it's not what you think. Don't insult me. Tell me the truth." His gaze flickered around, as if searching for an escape route in the cavernous living room. At length, he sighed and offered a halting explanation. She's a consultant for my company, you know that. She got pregnant. I didn't realize at first. And then she told me it was mine. I panicked. Lillian's knees nearly buckled. Hearing him admit it was like having a dagger twist in her gut. "So, you've been supporting her? Paying her bills? Coming to the same hospital I use? On the same day?" He stepped forward, expression pained. "Yes, but I never wanted you to find out this way. I was working up the courage to tell you. It's all a mess." An ache spread through Lillian's entire being. She placed a trembling hand on her own belly. "A mess? We're talking about 2 children here, yours with me and yours with her. This is more than a mess, Adrian." He reached out to her, desperation in his eyes. "I never meant for it to happen. One night after a celebratory business dinner, we both drank too much, and then it happened again. I'm not proud. I was just so stressed with expansions. With all this pressure, I made a terrible mistake." Lillian's tears broke free, cascading down her cheeks. She remembered how she'd begged him to take time off, to see a counselor, if stress was overwhelming him. He had brushed her off, choosing instead to confide in someone else's arms. "And what about her pregnancy?" she asked, voice trembling. "Was that our mistake too?" He hesitated, guilt radiating from him. She claimed she was on birth control. I believed her. Then she told me she was pregnant, and I tried to help. I set her up with the best doctors. I didn't want to abandon her or the baby. "Abandon her?" Lillian repeated incredulously. "What about abandoning me? You realize how humiliated I feel, finding you at the same hospital, fawning over another pregnant woman while I'm your wife." Adrian lowered his head. "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could keep both situations separate, but..." Lillian's anger flared. "You thought you could juggle 2 pregnant women? That's not just arrogance, Adrian. That's cruelty." He opened his mouth as though to argue, but then fell silent, shame flickering across his features. "You're right. It was selfish. I've been an idiot." No amount of contrition could stop Lillian's tears. She stepped back, folding her arms protectively over her baby bump. "I need you to leave," she managed, voice unsteady. "I need time to think without you in my face, spinning excuses." Adrian looked stricken. "Lil, I can't leave you alone like this." She almost laughed again, the sound bitter. "You left me alone for months while you were off with her, didn't you? Go stay in a hotel, a friend's place, anywhere but here." He stared at her, desperation warring with guilt in his eyes. But he must have realized there was no winning this argument. With slumped shoulders, he nodded. "I'll pack a bag." Lillian watched him ascend the graceful spiral staircase, remembering how he had once carried her up those very steps in a playful honeymoon moment. Now each footstep felt like a dull blow to her heart. Within 20 minutes, Adrian reappeared, duffel bag in hand. He paused by the door, voice trembling. "I love you, Lil. I still do. Please believe that." She said nothing. She stood frozen in place until the door clicked shut. Then, at last, her composure crumbled. She sank onto the nearest sofa, burying her face in her hands and letting the sobs come in waves. The penthouse felt cavernous and empty, an echo chamber for the heartbreak that threatened to consume her. The days that followed blurred into a fog of sorrow. Lillian woke each morning with puffy eyes. reaching unconsciously for a husband who no longer occupied the other side of the bed. Each time her hand found only cold sheets, she felt a fresh pang of betrayal. Gloria, the housekeeper, maintained a respectful distance, though her kind glances told Lillian that she suspected something was wrong. Despite her heartbreak, Lillian forced herself to keep up with her prenatal vitamins and basic meals. She couldn't starve the innocent life growing inside her. She took extended baths, letting the warm water soothe some of her tensions, but no amount of self-care could wipe away the bitterness of Adrian's betrayal. Naomi called daily. She offered emotional support, shared tidbits she'd uncovered about Beatrice, and encouraged Lillian to seek therapy. "I talked to a colleague in the marketing sphere," Naomi reported in one phone call. They confirmed that Beatrice was on an exclusive retainer from Adrian's company. It apparently goes beyond normal freelance work. Some folks even suspected they were seeing each other socially. But you know how rumors go, nobody wanted to bring it up publicly. Lillian leaned against the penthouse balcony railing, phone pressed to her ear as a frigid gust of October wind whipped her hair. "So I was the last to know," she murmured. "That's humiliating." Naomi paused. "It might not have been widespread knowledge, Lil. People in corporate circles can be discreet. But now that you've seen it up close, you should protect yourself financially, legally, emotionally." At the word legally, Lillian's stomach twisted. She hadn't once considered divorce or separation in a legal sense. The notion of splitting from Adrian before the baby arrived felt overwhelming. I don't know, Naomi. We took vows. We built this life." Naomi's voice gentled, "I'm not saying you have to do anything right away, but talk to a lawyer at least. Adrian might try to manipulate you into letting him have his cake and eat it too." Those words stoked Lillian's simmering fury. She recalled how Adrian wanted to keep everything separate, as though she and Beatrice were compartments in a well-structured plan. "I can't let him do that," she said quietly, placing a hand on her belly. "I won't let him treat our child like an afterthought." That night, Lillian found herself wandering through the penthouse's top-floor library, a space she rarely used. Adrian had curated an impressive collection: business tomes, entrepreneurship guides, history books. She passed them by, her mind swirling with dread over the future. Then her eyes landed on their wedding album, perched on a high shelf. The gold-embossed spine read Adrian and Lillian, 20s. Heart pounding, she reached up and pulled it down. She flipped through the pages, each photo a painful testament to a once unbreakable union. There was the picture of them laughing outside Manhattan City Hall after they filed their marriage license. Images of them exchanging vows under a flowery arbor in Central Park, the bright confetti swirling as they kissed. She remembered how her father, who'd flown in from California, cried during the ceremony. Adrian had held her so close, whispering that he'd treasure her forever. She slammed the album shut, tears threatening again. "Treasure me forever?" Had those words meant nothing? She felt compelled to toss the album into the trash or rip out the photos. But something stopped her. Perhaps she wasn't ready to destroy those memories, even if they now felt tainted. Instead, she placed the album back on the shelf, spine facing away from her, as though trying to hide the painful past. Just then, her phone rang. The caller ID read Adrian. A surge of conflicting emotions erupted: anger, longing, hate, love, heartbreak, resentment. With a shaky breath, she answered, "I just want to make sure you're okay," Adrian said softly. "Gloria mentioned you haven't been sleeping or eating well." Lillian swallowed bitterness. "I'm fine." Silence lingered. Then he said, "Look, I'm staying at a suite at the Four Seasons. I'm giving you space, but I can't stand not knowing if you're taking care of yourself." The hypocrisy rankled her. The man who betrayed me is now worried about my well-being. Ironic, he sighed. "I know. I deserve your anger, but you're carrying my child. Let me do something to help." She pressed a hand to her forehead, a headache forming. "I don't want your money or your fake sympathy," she snapped, though part of her recognized he was still legally tied to her finances. Their life was so entangled. "What I need is time and honesty." "Then let's talk, really talk," he pleaded. "Let me come over, or we can meet somewhere neutral. I want to explain everything." She closed her eyes, imagining his face. The thought of looking at him, hearing him talk about how it just happened with Beatrice, made her heart twist. "I'll think about it," she said finally, ending the call. That night, she slept fitfully, tossing and turning in the massive bed. Dreams haunted her, images of Adrian holding another woman, cradling that woman's belly, speaking softly to an unborn child that wasn't hers. She woke in a cold sweat around 3 in the morning, tears streaming, wishing she could somehow rewind time and not have to face this agonizing reality. In the days that followed, Naomi's investigations uncovered more details. Beatrice's marketing agency had skyrocketed thanks to Adrian's patronage. There were hush-hush rumors of Adrian funneling money into her business accounts, discreet enough to avoid suspicion. Lillian felt physically ill hearing about it. Meanwhile, Adrian texted her daily, begging for a chance to talk face to face. Eventually, Lillian agreed to meet, but on her terms. She chose a neutral place, the offices of her newly hired family lawyer, Harriet Forbes. Harriet was a no-nonsense attorney recommended by Naomi. She specialized in high-asset divorces and prenuptial disputes. Though Lillian still wasn't certain about divorce, she wanted legal advice on how to safeguard her finances and protect the baby. Harriet arranged a preliminary meeting, inviting Adrian and his attorney to discuss living arrangements and potential support while the pair figured out their marital status. On the appointed day, Lillian arrived at Harriet's sleek Midtown office. She wore a simple navy maternity dress, hair pulled back in a low bun. She hoped her outward composure would mask the churning inside her. Harriet greeted her warmly and led her to a polished conference room with a sweeping view of the city. Adrian and his lawyer arrived shortly after. Adrian attempted a small smile, but Lillian didn't return it. She felt Harriet's reassuring presence beside her. This was business, not a personal tear-fest. They got down to basics: financial disclosures, credit lines, property values. Harriet insisted that Lillian should have immediate access to funds separate from Adrian's, in case she needed it for medical expenses or emergencies. Adrian didn't resist. It was almost as if guilt guided him to agree with every term Harriet proposed. At one point, Harriet asked, "What about the other woman? Has she made a claim for child support or any legal arrangement with you, Mr. Moore?" Adrian winced, looking to his attorney for help. His attorney, a sharp-eyed man named Gerald Sinclair, cleared his throat. "We're working out a private agreement with Miss Lang. It's not final yet." Lillian felt a stab of resentment. So Adrian was indeed trying to handle everything behind closed doors, likely to prevent a scandal that could wreck his business empire. She almost wanted to scorn him publicly, but she also didn't want her child's father to be dragged through the mud. It was all so complicated. Halfway through the meeting, Harriet stepped out to consult with a paralegal, leaving Lillian and Adrian alone in the conference room for a few minutes. Tension draped the air like a heavy curtain. "Lil," Adrian murmured, leaning forward, "I'm sorry. More sorry than you'll ever know. If I could undo it, I would." She kept her eyes on the city skyline. "But you can't undo it, Adrian," he swallowed. "No, I can't. But I can try to do right by you, by our child." Bitterness clenched her heart. You should have remembered that before sleeping with her. You should have remembered that every time you decided to lie to me, you were excited about this baby too, or so I thought. "I am," he insisted, voice tight with emotion. "I still am. I'm not letting anything happen to you or our baby. I swear." She gave him a long, wounded look. "What about Beatrice's baby?" You plan to be a father to that child as well. He hesitated, tears forming in his eyes. I don't know. I can't abandon that child either. But it doesn't mean I love you any less. Lillian's heart twisted. Your love is worthless if it isn't accompanied by loyalty and truth. Before Adrian could reply, Harriet returned, accompanied by Gerald. They resumed, hammering out preliminary agreements. At the end, Harriet passed Lillian a folder with legal documents for her to review. Adrian left with his own stack of paperwork, shoulders slumped. Lillian felt drained, as if her soul had been wrung dry. She hoped that was the end of her direct involvement with Beatrice. But fate had other plans. The very next day, Lillian was at Starbucks, craving a soothing cup of herbal tea after another restless night. She stood near the pickup counter, mentally going over Harriet's suggestions for setting up a separate bank account, when she heard a voice that made her spine stiffen. "Lillian?" She turned to see Beatrice Lang, the mistress herself, standing a few feet away. Beatrice wore a loose-fitting blouse and maternity jeans, her belly unmistakable. Despite her casual clothes, the woman exuded a poised elegance. Her face was pale, eyes reflecting nervous energy. Lillian's pulse thundered, every instinct screamed to walk away or hurl accusations. Yet she found herself rooted in place, stunned by the bizarre coincidence of running into the very woman she wanted to avoid. "I didn't expect to see you here," Beatrice said, voice trembling. Lillian forced a tight-lipped response. "Nor I you." They stood in awkward silence until the barista handed Lillian her tea. Beatrice picked up her own decaf latte, then ventured softly, "Do you mind if we speak for a minute, privately?" Lillian stared, torn between revulsion and a strange curiosity. A part of her wanted to punch Beatrice for participating in the destruction of her marriage. Another part recognized that her fury was also with Adrian, and maybe hearing Beatrice out would give her clarity. Wordlessly, she nodded, stepping to a corner table away from other patrons. Sitting down, Lillian placed her tea on the table, uncertain what to do with her hands. Beatrice did the same. Up close, Lillian noticed the shadows under Beatrice's eyes, the tension in her jaw. She looked as miserable as Lillian felt. "I'm so sorry," Beatrice began, eyes filling with tears. "I never intended. I didn't know Adrian was still fully committed to you. He told me you two were basically living separate lives, that your marriage was on paper only. By the time I realized that wasn't true, I was already." Her hand drifted to her belly, pregnant. Lillian clenched her jaw. It was painful to hear. "What did you think would happen? Even if we were separated, you knew I was also pregnant. Did that not raise any red flags?" Beatrice's eyes darted with guilt. "I didn't find out about your pregnancy until later. Adrian kept telling me he was going to finalize a divorce, that you both wanted different things." Rage boiled inside Lillian. "He fed us both lies, apparently." Beatrice nodded, tears threatening. "I'm not making excuses. I betrayed another woman, but Adrian was so convincing. He said we were his future, that my career was taking off and we'd be this power couple. Then I discovered it wasn't the whole truth when he started panicking about me going to the same hospital. I confronted him, but he brushed it off, said it would be fine as long as we avoided crossing paths." Lillian felt a surge of nausea, the nerve of him plotting how to keep them apart. "Now you want what? My forgiveness? My blessing?" Beatrice shook her head, face pale. "No, I just want you to know the truth. I'm not out to take your money or ruin your life, but my baby deserves support. If Adrian wants to be in his child's life, I won't stop him. If he doesn't, I'll pursue legal action. I'm not trying to be cruel, I'm just trying to survive." The baby in Lillian's womb squirmed, as if reacting to the tension. She pressed a protective hand to her abdomen, tears stinging her own eyes. "We're both pregnant by the same man. It's surreal." Beatrice exhaled shakily. I wish I could turn back time. I wouldn't do it again. Lillian studied her, torn between outrage and pity. She could see the anguish etched on Beatrice's face, echoing her own. Maybe they were both victims of Adrian's manipulations, or maybe they'd each made choices that led to this heartbreak. Nothing was black and white. Finally, Lillian stood. I appreciate you explaining, but it doesn't change the betrayal. I won't stand in the way of you getting child support. But understand that Adrian and I are also trying to figure out our future. Beatrice blinked back tears. I do, and I'm truly sorry. Lillian left the Starbucks, chest pounding. She'd come for a moment of peace, and instead collided with the woman whose existence tore apart her life. The encounter left her shaken and uncertain if she'd find a path to forgiveness, for Beatrice or for Adrian. As Lillian grappled with her personal anguish, Adrian faced mounting pressures on the professional front. His company, More Tech Innovations, had been riding high on a wave of new investor interest until rumors began to swirl. Word got out that Adrian was entangled in personal drama involving 2 pregnant women, and that gossip soon reached the ears of potential collaborators. People speculated about hush money, corporate malfeasance, even shady dealings to keep Beatrice's business afloat. It didn't help that Beatrice's marketing agency had recently landed an exclusive contract with Mortec, raising eyebrows about favoritism. Whispers emerged of impropriety and nepotism, suggesting that Adrian had funneled company funds to her personal accounts in addition to paying her retainer. Though no concrete evidence surfaced, speculation alone was enough to make some investors skittish. One particularly grey afternoon, Adrian found himself in his corner office, a glass-walled sanctum that overlooked the skyscrapers of Manhattan, frantically checking his phone. He had multiple missed calls from both Lillian and Beatrice, along with a voice message from an investor threatening to withdraw support if the negative publicity continued. His second-in-command, Marcus Nguyen, popped into the office. "We lost the bid for that cybersecurity contract," Marcus said grimly. They decided to go with a competitor, citing concerns about leadership stability. Adrian cursed under his breath. "We're fine. We'll pivot to the new software launch. This is just a momentary setback." Marcus hesitated. "Look, I'm not trying to pry into your personal life, but word around the office is that you're in a complicated situation. People are talking, and it's affecting morale." Adrian slumped in his leather executive chair, feeling uncharacteristically helpless. "I know. I'm dealing with it." Marcus nodded awkwardly and left. Alone, Adrian swiveled to stare out the window. The city he once conquered now felt like a labyrinth closing in on him. The heartbreak on Lillian's face haunted him. The panic in Beatrice's voice, demanding clarity, gnawed at his conscience. He had been too arrogant, believing he could balance his personal transgressions without consequence. Now everything is unraveling. In an act of desperation, Adrian tried once more to reach Lillian, leaving a voicemail. "Lil, it's me. I'm sorry about everything. I can't sleep, can't think straight. My business is in trouble, and I just need to hear your voice. Please call me back." But no reply came. Lillian had retreated into her own protective shell, communicating only through Harriet when necessary. Even Gloria, the loyal housekeeper, texted him once, saying Lillian was struggling emotionally but refused to let him back in. Days stretched, and Mortec's woes deepened. Adrian scrambled to reassure stakeholders, but rumors about his personal scandal wouldn't die down. A persistent hush blanketed the upper management floor, as though employees braced themselves for a bigger implosion. Meanwhile, Adrian's finances were under scrutiny. Harriet had demanded an accounting of all his personal bank accounts and assets, likely building a case for spousal and child support should Lillian file for divorce. He tried to find solace in the idea that he could at least maintain a relationship with both children, but the lines were blurred. Beatrice expected more involvement from him, while Lillian wanted space. He was failing them both and himself. One late evening, after a grueling day of crisis control, Adrian returned to his suite at the Four Seasons. He flipped on the television absent-mindedly, only to be confronted by a local news segment discussing New York's tech scandal of the season. A journalist on screen alluded to rumors of an affair and corporate ethics violations at a prominent startup. They didn't name him outright, but the details left little doubt. Adrian sank onto the couch, head in his hands. This was the karmic backlash Lillian had warned him about, albeit indirectly. He had gambled his marriage, his integrity, and perhaps even his empire, all for a fleeting escape from stress. And now the bill had come due. Inside the penthouse, Lillian felt a surge of determination grow amidst her heartbreak. She thought of her unborn child, the little being who would soon enter this world, innocent of the chaos swirling around. If Adrian's empire was on shaky ground, she couldn't rely on him for stability. She needed to stand on her own 2 feet. She began by arranging a follow-up meeting with Harriet, asking about the steps to file a legal separation. Harriet welcomed her into the same glass-walled conference room as before, expression calm and professional. "Lillian, if you want a legal separation, we can file it quickly," Harriet explained. "It doesn't finalize a divorce, but it outlines spousal support, child support, and asset division for the interim." Lillian took a breath. "I think that's what I want. I'm not sure about divorce yet, but I need boundaries." Harriet nodded, then added gently, "Are you considering counseling? Sometimes couples can salvage a relationship even after an affair if both parties commit to therapy." Lillian lowered her gaze to her clasped hands. She recalled how Adrian once promised they'd attend a workshop for new parents, but that was before everything crumbled. "I don't know if I can forgive this," she admitted. "He fathered another child at the same time as ours. It's a lot to process." "I understand," Harriet said, compassion in her voice. "You have every right to protect yourself." Lillian left the office feeling a small weight lift from her shoulders. She was taking concrete steps, not simply drowning in grief. That night, she called Naomi to share her decision. "It's a good move," Naomi encouraged. "No matter how things turn out, you'll have legal protections in place. Adrian can't just sweet talk you into dropping everything once the baby's born." A pang of sadness still lingered. It shouldn't have come to this. She had envisioned a blissful household, with Adrian carrying the baby's car seat, cooing at the newborn as they navigated the joys and trials of parenthood together. She'd never pictured attorneys, separation papers, and the presence of a mistress in the background. But reality rarely adhered to fairy tale scripts. Lillian pressed a hand to her belly, feeling a gentle kick. "I promise I'll keep you safe," she whispered to the unborn child. "No matter what." In the midst of swirling legal documents and emotional upheaval, Lillian received a surprising invitation. Beatrice wanted to see her. This time it came through Harriet, who said that Beatrice's lawyer reached out, suggesting a cordial meeting to discuss the children's future. Lillian's first instinct was to say no. She had no interest in bonding with the woman who had destroyed her marriage. But Harriet advised that it might be beneficial to understand Beatrice's intentions. If both women reached some mutual understanding about Adrian's role, it could prevent a prolonged legal battle. Reluctantly, Lillian agreed to a meeting at a discreet cafe in Midtown, chosen to avoid paparazzi or curious onlookers. She arrived early, scanning the softly lit interior. Dark wood panels, plush chairs, and private booths offered a sense of seclusion. She took a seat in a corner, ordering a chamomile tea. When Beatrice walked in, Lillian's stomach knotted. The woman's pregnancy had advanced visibly. She looked tired yet determined, her posture tense. Spotting Lillian, Beatrice gave a timid nod and approached. They skipped pleasantries, diving right into the heart of the matter. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Beatrice began, easing into the chair. "I know this is awkward, to say the least." Lillian inhaled slowly, picking her words carefully. "You said you wanted to talk about the children." Beatrice nodded, eyes downcast. "I'm about 7 months along now. I presume you're roughly the same. Adrian hasn't been very forthcoming about how he plans to be involved. He's mentioned child support, but that's it." Lillian felt a flicker of sympathy. However awful the situation, the child was innocent. "I don't know Adrian's plans either. We're barely speaking. I've filed for a legal separation." Beatrice swallowed, guilt clouding her expression. "I'm not looking for a fight. I just want to avoid a scenario where the children become pawns in a bitter legal battle. If Adrian chooses to be in my baby's life, then I'd like my child to know his half-sibling too, eventually." Lillian's chest tightened. The notion of co-parenting with a mistress was unthinkable. Yet the children were connected by blood. "That's a lot to handle. We're not even sure if Adrian and I can salvage anything." Beatrice nodded, tears threatening to surface. "I understand. I just didn't want to blindside you in the future." Silence hung over them. Lillian studied Beatrice, noticing her anxious fingers wrapped around a mug of decaf coffee. She realized they were both frightened, both facing motherhood in uncertain circumstances. Adrian's betrayal might have bound them in a twisted way none of them asked for. Eventually, Lillian cleared her throat. "I can't promise anything, but I won't deny the children a chance to know each other if everything is handled respectfully. That said, I also won't let Adrian keep me or my child in the dark." Beatrice breathed out, relief softening her features. "Thank you. That's all I wanted to say." They exchanged a few more words about doctor visits, due dates, and the complexities of single motherhood, though Lillian hesitated to reveal too much of her personal struggles. When they parted, Lillian felt a peculiar sense of closure. She didn't forgive Beatrice, but she understood her better. Maybe they were both casualties of Adrian's self-centered choices. Still, as Lillian walked away from the cafe, she knew that the real storm was yet to come. The births, the finalization of legal agreements, and the question of whether Adrian could rebuild a place in her life. The path looked daunting, but she had at least found some ground to stand on. Weeks later, a flurry of headlines engulfed more tech innovations. An internal whistleblower leaked documents suggesting that Adrian had moved company funds to a private consultancy tied to Beatrice. Although the amounts weren't astronomical, the press latched onto the scandal, framing it as an abuse of power. Bloomberg ran a segment titled "Betrayal in Business: A Rising Tech Mogul's Fall from Grace." Investors panicked, and the stock for more tech tanked. Adrian tried to fight back. He released statements denying any wrongdoing, claiming the funds were part of a legitimate campaign. However, the negative publicity proved too much. Board members demanded his resignation as CEO to appease stakeholders. Within a month, Adrian stepped down, ousted from the very company he'd built from the ground up. Naomi called Lillian in a near frenzy. "Have you seen the news? They forced Adrian out." Lillian sank onto the sofa, holding her belly protectively. She was about 8 months pregnant now, feeling every bit of the physical and emotional weight. "No, I didn't see. I've tried to avoid the headlines." "Well, it's official," Naomi said. "He's done at Moretech. They're installing an interim CEO while they assess corporate structure." Lillian felt a tumult of emotions: sadness, anger, a strange sense of vindication. "He did bring it on himself," she murmured, recalling how Harriet had once warned her that these storms might come without more. Tech's backing, Adrian's finances looked less stable. He had some personal reserves, but expensive lawsuits and severance clauses with the board might whittle them down. Lillian was in limbo, relying on Harriet's guidance to secure a spousal support arrangement. She didn't want to see Adrian bankrupt, but neither did she want her child left vulnerable. After hearing the news, Adrian reached out to Lillian. This time she agreed to meet him in Harriet's presence, wanting to maintain clarity. The meeting took place at Harriet's office once again, but the dynamic had shifted drastically. Adrian no longer walked in with an air of unshakable confidence. He appeared haggard, sporting faint stubble and loose-fitting clothes. Harriet and Lillian sat across from him at the sleek conference table. In a subdued tone, Adrian admitted, "I messed up on so many fronts. The board found irregularities in the marketing funds. They pinned it on me for personal involvement. I might be facing legal scrutiny for misappropriation. I'm going to try to fight it, but it doesn't look good." Lillian stared at him, tears pricking her eyes. She recalled the ambitious young man she'd fallen in love with, the one who believed in ethics and innovation. Now he was a shadow of that man. "I'm sorry it's come to this," she said quietly, though a part of her recognized the karmic retribution. Adrian nodded miserably. Then he shifted to the real topic. "Lillian, the first, still want to be part of our child's life. I don't have the same resources as before, but I'll do whatever it takes. Even if it means I have to find new investors or a new job. I can't lose my family." Lillian's voice wavered. "You already lost me, Adrian, but our child is innocent. I won't stop you from being a father, as long as you prioritize our baby's well-being." Harriet interjected with a legal perspective. "Given Mr. Moore's situation, we need to establish consistent financial support that isn't reliant on the uncertain outcomes of the lawsuits. We also need to finalize a custody agreement once the baby is born." Adrian swallowed, nodding. "I understand. I'll comply with whatever arrangement is set." A short time later, Harriet escorted Lillian out, leaving Adrian with his attorney. Out in the hallway, Harriet placed a hand gently on Lillian's shoulder. "You did well. You're looking out for your child. Let him face the consequences of his actions." Lillian felt a bitter-sweet ache. She hadn't expected to see Adrian so broken, yet this was the reality of karma, unstoppable, merciless. Perhaps, if he had chosen honesty and faithfulness, they could have weathered the storms of business together. Instead, he faced them alone. At last, the day arrived when Lillian's contractions began. It was early morning, the sun barely piercing the skyline, when a piercing pain jolted her awake. She tried breathing exercises, but the contractions rolled in with increasing intensity. Gloria rushed to assist, quickly calling Lillian's chosen driver. They sped to Mount Sinai Hospital, ironically, the same place where the entire catastrophe had begun. Lillian gripped the seat, sweat beading on her forehead. Fear mingled with anticipation. "Let this baby be healthy," she prayed, "no matter the turmoil in my life." She arrived at the maternity ward, staff promptly ushering her to a delivery room. Naomi joined her as her birth coach, offering encouraging words and cool compresses. Hours ticked by in a blur of intense pain and medical instructions. Finally, with a final guttural push, Lillian's baby let out a wail strong, vibrant. Tears of relief streamed down her face as a nurse placed a tiny, squirming daughter into her arms. She counted the baby's fingers, kissed the soft forehead, and felt a rush of love so powerful. It eclipsed every heartbreak she'd endured. Naomi snapped a few pictures, tears in her own eyes. "She's perfect, Lil." In a twist of fate, Adrian arrived moments later, having been alerted by Harriet. He rushed into the room, face flushed with emotion. Lillian, cradling the baby, allowed him to approach hesitantly. He gazed at their daughter, tears welling. "She's beautiful," he whispered, voice cracking. Thank you for giving me this miracle." Lillian looked down at the tiny face, so pure and unknowing. In that instant, she felt a surge of protective love for her child, and an odd sense of pity for Adrian, who'd thrown away so much. "Meet your daughter," she said softly, "but understand that I'm doing this for her, not for us." He nodded, gently placing a hand on the baby's back, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I know. I'll always be here if she needs me." Those words hung in the air, a fragile promise from a man who had broken so many. Yet Lillian allowed the moment to stand, for her daughter's sake. She hadn't decided if she'd ever fully forgive Adrian, but she wouldn't deprive him of fatherhood if he genuinely aimed to be a part of the child's life. Meanwhile, across Manhattan, Beatrice was in her own final weeks of pregnancy. Word eventually reached Lillian that Beatrice gave birth to a boy a month later, healthy and strong. Adrian, weighed down by legal troubles and a tarnished reputation, still insisted on acknowledging paternity, setting up a structured support plan. The press eventually tired of the scandal. Other headlines emerged: celebrity feuds, political dramas, and the story of Adrian Moore's double pregnancy fiasco faded from the public eye. But for Lillian, the real work began, raising her daughter in a world where her father might appear only on scheduled visits. Juggling job applications, she had chosen to look for flexible freelance projects in design and forging a path toward emotional healing. She sold the penthouse and moved to a cozy apartment near Central Park, a place bright with natural light and far less haunted by memories. Naomi visited often, bringing groceries and baby supplies. Harriet helped finalize the legal separation. Adrian sent monthly checks and visited his daughter every weekend, bearing an awkward mixture of remorse and devotion. Some nights, after the baby was asleep, Lillian reflected on the unpredictability of life. She saw how illusions of perfection could crumble in an instant, but also how resilience and love, especially a mother's love, could rebuild a new sense of security. She felt stronger than ever, forging a future that revolved around her child rather than a man's ambition or betrayal. Epilogue. 6 months later, Lillian strolled with her baby girl through Central Park. The crisp air carried the scent of turning leaves, a promise of new seasons. She noticed a father teaching his toddler to ride a small bike, a mother chasing after her giggling twins. Even though her journey had been fraught with heartbreak, Lillian found herself smiling. Life could be complicated, but it also offered second chances, new beginnings that sometimes grew from the ashes of painful endings. She paused at a bench, lifting her baby in her arms. The little one gurgled happily, tiny fingers reaching for her mother's face. Lillian kissed those fingers. In that tender moment, she knew they would be okay together, mother and child. She had discovered her strength, endured the worst storms, and emerged with something priceless, a baby's laughter and a heart that could still hope for better days ahead. Betrayals cut deeply, but sometimes those cuts reveal the hidden resilience we carry inside. That's what happened when a routine prenatal appointment sparked a chain of shocking truths for Lillian. Her millionaire husband was juggling not just big business deals, but a secret mistress and a second baby on the way. Ultimately, Adrian's facade crumbled under the weight of his lies. He lost his company, his standing, and the unwavering devotion of a wife whose heart he broke. Yet amid the heartbreak rose a new chapter for Lillian, guided by the fierce love for her newborn daughter. She found a path toward independence, built a safer home, and discovered that healing is possible even after the worst kind of betrayal. If this story gripped you with its twists, heartbreak, and karma's decisive hand, please hit the like button. Share it with friends who appreciate a compelling drama, and subscribe for more riveting tales. Your support helps keep these stories alive.